Woohoo! Welcome back, warriors.
Woohoo! Yay!
We are really excited for today's episode. We're going to be sharing all about separation anxiety.
Yes.
What it means to us,
Yeah.
how we define it, and how it's shown up in our lives, maybe starting from childhood, moving on through adulthood.
Just following us along.
Just like all of our anxiety. It's just started when we were young and it's still here.
And it's
What's
still
that song?
here.
What's that song? It's like started from the bottom, now we're here. It started when we were little, now we're here, basically.
I love that you're starting the episode with singing.
I wouldn't really call what I just did singing, but sure. With a song lyric anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So Abby, I'm dying to know like how you would define separation anxiety.
Yeah. So, I feel like sometimes we talk about stuff like anxious attachment or, anxious attachment anxiety, or we talk, just about all these different types of anxiety. And one of the things I really think about is, for me, in my experiences, anxiety, one is a spectrum, right? And it's not a linear spectrum. It's not like two ends. It's kind of like a circular spectrum.
Again, never ending.
It's never ending. But different anxieties make me feel different ways. And I talk a lot about anxious attachment because that is a very strong anxiety, but that feels different than separation anxiety, even though both of them for me usually, or they do relate to being in relationship with someone else.
Right.
So like for anxious attachment, my mind will constantly race. It's really hard for me to focus. I feel restless and jittery. Like I'm just very uncomfortable in my body. But when I feel separation anxiety, I feel more like I'm losing a part of myself. Like I just feel sad and I feel like crying. And it's more of like a low, like depressed sensation, while like anxious attachment feels more like buzzy.
You said busy, and immediately in my mind, I'm like, it feels buzzy. Like,
that's the greatest way to say it. It's buzzy. And so, for me, I define both of those as showing up in relation to others. But there's a lot of the narrative that goes with it and the sensations in my body that help me decipher what type of anxiety I'm actually feeling.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I resonate with that. I didn't really think about it that way, but I resonate with that a bit. I guess for me, I kind of describe it as just an extreme, and I use the word extreme, or like relentless amount of fear of I think from a young age it was about being abandoned.
Yeah.
Right. And then as I grew, it was more about like being away for any period of time, again dependent on the person and the situation or my mood or whatever, from any kind of secure attachment figure. So like and that changed as I grew. So like as a kid, it's my parents, my siblings, and then as I got older, it was certain friends and, my high school sweetheart, who's now my husband, right? Like, so there was a lot of that. And so, yeah, I think for me, I would define it as like just extreme fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
That kind of morphed into the being away, like feeling, I guess, kind of buzzy too. Buzzy or I think you said feeling buzzy, it isn't how you feel when you're.
No, with anxious, yes, but not with separation,
but not with separation. For me, it's buzzy when I'm away from secure attachments.
Wow.
And it still shows up. Definitely. It's less consistent, but we're going to get into that.
Yeah, no. And, I love that, you acknowledge friends, your parents, and your partner, right? Because for me as a kid, I feel like, and this is all like reflecting now, so who really knows, but as a kid, I feel like I was more having separation anxiety with my parents, but I was having more, when I say kid, I also mean like middle school and high school, like having anxious attachment with friends and dating. Right. But now I feel like even like in my relationship with Dan, it started out as having anxious attachment, but then if he like went on a trip, I would have separation anxiety. So,
So it sounds like it's maybe more about the extension of time a little bit, right? Like the way you just mentioned the trip, right? It's like, you know, that you're in a secure relationship, regardless of the fact that your anxious attachment style, you're in a secure relationship that's validated all the time, but it's that extended period of time. And that's kind of like, I feel you on that. 100%.
Yeah. And I put it together as you were talking. So of course, like
this is why we do that again, always. So it's just helpful to, and I'm glad that there's still an emphasis on thinking about separation anxiety as grownups, because I think that this term gets thrown around for the most part when it comes to young children.
Right.
And it's like, as if like you grow out of it or something.
Yeah.
And it's like when people say, oh, you're as an adult, you shouldn't be scared. It's like, who's saying that? Right. Yeah. Like human beings are scared at all stages of their lives.
Yeah. So, it all stems from something. So let's see. I'm excited to hear what you're going to say. We're going to share some like childhood and stories around now too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's hear some separation anxiety.
I love the way we always phrase like, let's hear about your insert super problems or super struggles. So for me, one of my earliest memories of having separation anxiety was going to preschool. And I think this is probably true. And for all the mama and papa bears and family bears out there listening, know that maybe they've experienced this either themselves or with their children or grandchildren or kids that they care for. So I don't actually remember this as being like, it was my first day at preschool and I was anxious about my mom leaving. It was like later in the year or something. I was in a mood. It was a morning. It wasn't a good day. And I feel like we were running late.
Oh,
and I can't say for certain. And I didn't get, backup confirmation from my mom on this. Maybe I will after the fact. Or she'll listen most likely and be like, actually, it was this date. But we showed up late to preschool and for whatever reason, I did not want to go inside.
Yeah.
I did not want to go in. I was freaking out about the idea of leaving my mom. And I was screaming and bawling my eyes out. And I have I could close my eyes now and remember extremely vivid memory of the teacher having a grip on my arm.
Ooh.
And trying to yank me into the classroom.
Yeah.
And then my mom obviously doing her best to like take some steps back and leave. Right. And I remember like we did talk about this moment like years later because it's stayed with me all these years, and I'm 39 years old now and I was 4, right? So you imagine that like some of our childhood stuff stays with us for a long time, and that's normal. But when we chatted about it years later, I was like, do you remember that day? And she did. And it was like, and I feel like she said, I really wish that we just skipped preschool that day.
Wow.
Because of course it was bad for her too.
Right.
She left.
She had a rough day.
My daughter is screaming. And I'm sure that it was the case that I got in there and a few minutes later, I was probably fine, as is the case. And I was a preschool teacher. And I remember dealing with this with kids and parents at the beginning of the school year and sometimes later in the year too. You just don't know what's specifically triggering. And the kids don't always have the language to tell you what's actually going on with them. Right. I just knew in the moment, I did not want to leave my mom, but she left. Right. And so like you get over it in the moment, but now look, here I am. Like I said, however many, I'm not doing math right now. So many years later, talking about this moment. Right. And so it had an impact for sure. And I kind of, again, being reflective on it, I kind of attribute that behavior and that experience to shakeups to routines and rituals and having enough time to mentally and physically prepare for a situation.
Right.
And so I think the act of running late for preschool, right, knowing that I was coming in after school had started and my classmates were probably going to be already busy and circle time and playing or whatever in the moment. Again, not having the language skills to express any of that.
Right.
And certainly not knowing that I was having separation anxiety.
Right.
And as we know in the 80s, parents teachers didn't talk about this kind of stuff
No.
with parents and what to expect. And maybe it's a good idea for mommy to come into the room for a few minutes, right? And that's no big deal. So yeah, that's kind of where I landed with my childhood stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
That story just, I can still feel that grip on my arm.
Yeah.
Ripping me into a room.
That's the thing is, like you said, like that moment had an impact, right? And that is like the crazy thing about childhood and also like working with children is you just never know what is the thing that they're going to carry with them.
Yeah.
And that impacts them versus like, maybe there was another day you had a hard time leaving your mom, but you don't remember it.
I don't remember it. Like, I'm sure there were a lot of days.
Yeah. Right.
As a very sensitive kid. Right. Yeah. And then not dissimilarly, when I was leaving for college, and I talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, how the idea of leaving home felt really raw and scary and vulnerable for me. And I had waited. I did 2 years of local community college and then a year off to just work and figure out what I wanted. And I felt ready in many ways to jump ship and leave home for the first time and expand my net and meet new people and have new experiences and have school a little bit further away. But I just remember so much of that same body reaction going on. Yeah. Right. Just like, obviously no one was gripping my arm or throwing me into a car, like boot to the butt, like you're going to school, get in the van kind of deal.
Yeah.
But I just remember how slowly I moved my stuff to the car, how long it took me to say goodbye to, at the time it was just Adam because my siblings were much older than me. They were out of the house and, moved, and it just wasn't like that at the time. It wasn't like saying goodbye to them in the moment because they weren't living with me. Our relationship was just different. And my parents were driving me to school. And so I didn't have to say goodbye to them just yet. But I just remember like it was like, again, I can see it. I remember it. It was like, I left Adam on the curb. He like walked out with like all my bags and he was like waving to me as we drove off. And I cried for like 3 out of the 4 hours of our drive. It was crazy. And I was 21. Yeah. And I was just my parents felt so awful for me. They were just like, oh my God. They didn't say anything. They held space. Yeah. They were quiet. They kind of let me cry it out. And I felt better, but not really after that. It was like, all right, the crying helped, but it didn't at the same time. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was more about, even with all the planning, when something is about to shake up your life, shake up your routine in a big way. Yeah. And as a 21-year-old who was afraid to leave home for when she was 18 and decided she wasn't ready for that yet. Yeah. Even though in my mind, in my heart, in my deep gut, I knew it's time. Yeah. Right. It's time to try to be, to do new things and explore. I still had those feelings that like, I don't want to leave my everyday. And like my secure what had become a secure attachment. And
then, you're in the car driving, crying and, feeling these feelings around Adam, but you're going to have to say goodbye to your parents in like 4 or 5 hours too. So I feel like that would also, at least I'm putting myself
they stayed overnight. They did stay overnight.
Okay.
Not in my room, but like they had a hotel and so they were still around. I think they knew too, right? Like they knew I was not going to be ready in this same day to be like, okay, bye Adam. And then also bye to my parents. Like they were just like, no, we're going to stay the night. We'll leave tomorrow night, so that
your mom's like, I learned the lesson from preschool.
Exactly. Book a room was the lesson learned. Right. Yeah. So like I was just saying, these shakeups to my routine, my rituals, this is what I kind of think about when I think about separation anxiety too, because there's a predictability and a safety in that predictability. Yeah. Right. And so without that predictability, hello, that's a threat to my nervous system, right? Sympathetic nervous system, like, help me. Yeah. And so, some of the practices that have served me through my life, not so much in that situation.
Right.
Certainly not when I was 4. But learning about this, talking more about my anxiety, so much of what's helped is having regular open communication,
Yeah.
right? Lots and lots of talking, talking to my loved ones, my secure attachments, keeping in contact with them, even when I'm taking a trip, or if Adam's going to be away for a couple days, or whatever the situation is. Now, I feel like as long as we're in regular communication, then I'm soothed. I'm feeling okay. And then the active practice of just reminding myself all the times I spent away, right? Or tried something that was tricky or big or scary or out of my comfort zones, and how it benefited me or how I felt during that experience. So recalling joyful and positive and exciting memories of like, hey, you've got this because you've done it before.
Right.
And remember that amazing thing that you were able to do because you allowed yourself to separate from a person or a place or whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes it includes like moving my body, taking a walk, dancing, going outside, and allowing myself to fully indulge in comforts and favorite things too. Like watching my favorite TV show over and over again. It's like, all right, I'm having a little bit of separation anxiety from this person. So I better not, put on the news for too long, because that's not going to help me. That's going to trigger me.
The TV
I better put
show
on
is like
The
a
Office.
friend. Yes, you're with your friends.
I need a friend. Exactly. And so indulging, making some comfort food, right? Like having my cup of tea, doing some mindful eating, drinking. Like these are the things that I would consider to be active practices. These experiences.
I really love also how when you said like, when things moving forward, like if you're going to go on a trip or if something's going to happen, you remind yourself of how things worked out previously. But it's not just and everything was okay. I like that added piece that you think about the amazing things that came from it, because that really creates like a little bit more of like, I mean, in my mind, like excitement, like, oh, what's possible this time? Versus like, I was okay, I'll be okay again, which is also great. Right. But there's that added bit to it that's also like, and here was
possibilities,
an amazing thing that happened. So here, what else could happen?
Right. Yes. I
Very
appreciate you
powerful.
reflecting that to me. And it does make a difference. It does make a difference. I wind up feeling safer and better just from those reminders.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hear about your separation issues.
So it actually, this topic, although like, you and I both like talked about it, like this topic was really kind of hard for me to think of a childhood event. And one, I think it's because like I had a lot of separation anxiety in the sense of like, I always had a hard time falling asleep at night. And I always had to have my mom come into my room and rub my back until I fell asleep. Right. And it wasn't until recently that I was like, oh, that could be a behavior because of separation anxiety. So I think that I had a lot of it as a kid. But there was only one story that really stuck out. And the funny thing is like towards the end of the story, it's even blurry. But I remember my parents, I was about 7 or 8. And I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger than me. So he was like 3 or 4. And my parents went out somewhere and we had a family friend's son come babysit us. And I like knew him. And I didn't want them to go. I did not want them to go. I was upset that they were going. And I kind of like shut down when they left. And I went upstairs and was like sulking or whatever. And then I remember the babysitter was like playing with my brother and I felt like left out. And I just wanted my parents back. I can't, just like you, I can't really explain it. I remember I used to have some nightmares as a kid of losing my parents. So did I have a nightmare that night before? And that caused me to worry. But I just was like screaming. I was like throwing stuff all around the house. I had this like small, tiny little loft in my bedroom. And there was like this window that would look into like my parents' room area. And I was just starting to throw stuff at the babysitter and my brother because I just wanted my parents to come home and nothing else worked. Like saying, can we call my parents? Can my parents come home? You know? And of course, this kid is like a teenage boy. Like he doesn't know how to handle this.
Not equipped.
And, you know, I remember I had this like Cabbage Patch lamp and it was a big lamp. It was like at least a foot or two. And I remember dangling it by the wire out the like loft window. And I like loved that lamp. I didn't want anything to happen, but I was so worked up. I was willing to do anything to get my parents back. And, you know, when I think about it now, you know, I just think it's really unfortunate that that behavior definitely came off as like bratty. You know, people would have looked at me and called me a brat. I don't think like my parents called me a brat, but I'm just saying like if someone were on the outside looking in, or that poor teenage boy, you know, but I was just in, like you said, like that fight or flight, you know, reflex. I was there because the threat was that my parents were gone and I wanted them back so much. I was willing to fight to get them, you know, and eventually like I vaguely remember like connecting with them on the phone and them saying they were going to be home at some point. And, you know, it all kind of blacks out from there. I don't really remember. But even now, like, you know, sometimes like I feel uncomfortable by my behavior, but I also know that that behavior was communicating the unmet need that I didn't feel like my parents were safe, which then it made me not safe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So like, I'm glad you mentioned, because one of my first questions was going to be, did you ask the babysitter anything, or were you just acting out, right? Was it just behaviors, or were you also attempting to communicate with this kid essentially? Like you said a couple of times, can we call my parents? Can we call my mom? You know? And so, and I'm curious, like, obviously he wasn't equipped to deal with your needs at that time.
No.
As most teenage boys or girls or anybody would not be able to deal with that.
Especially in the 80s.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, like, how did he respond to you? And do you remember reacting to him responding in any way?
You know, like a lot of it is fuzzy. And that's like part of the challenge with my anxiety, is that when I get too overworked, like my memories aren't as vivid, you know, like, but I remember him like trying to like include me in playing with him and my brother. And I remember him like, you know, saying like, I can go be by myself in the room, but like none of those things were soothing. Right. I didn't want to play with him and my brother. I wanted my parents, you know, I didn't want to be by myself with my discomfort, you know? And so that's like the little bit that I do remember.
Did he tell you, no, you can't talk to your parents when you'd asked for that?
I don't even remember, but eventually I was able to. So if he did tell me no, I wore him down. Like,
Or maybe they called.
Or maybe they called to check in. Yeah.
Oh, the days before cell phones.
I know. I thought about that. I was like, you know, like, right, exactly.
Yeah.
What was it like before then, where we couldn't just have instant access to the people we care about?
Right. And even then, like we spent some time talking about that too, right? It's like when you text a loved one and we don't hear from them for a while, it's like, oh, come on. We know you must have that phone like less than a foot away from you. How are you not responding to me? But the logic sets in, or when you eventually talk to that person, hopefully they let you know like, hey, this is where I've been, or this is what I've been doing.
Right.
But that's so interesting. And so like, how has, separation anxiety followed you through, your youth or adulthood?
Yeah. So what's interesting is like the fight part changed, right? So like, I told you how I separate like anxious attachment anxiety from separation anxiety. And so as an adult, the sensations of separation anxiety have really changed. So it's not really like fight or flight. It's more feeling like sorrow and loss. And what's funny is the story I'm going to tell is not this one, but I just want to quickly talk on you bringing up college, because as you were talking about that, I had this flash of when I was in my dorm room and no one else was there, and my parents and my brother were leaving. And I remember that sensation. And then just as they were leaving, like one of my, like, they put 5 of us in a room, which is crazy, but one of those roommates who I hadn't met walked in and kind of like I had to get it together, because I probably would have like laid in my bed crying, but then it was like, oh, this new person who's my roommate, I have to be
talk
cool,
to them,
collected.
engage. Interesting.
So like that, I feel like just going to college can be really relatable for some people in how, all the emotions that get brought up with that. But when I was thinking about separation anxiety as an adult, you know, I just remember how when I used to live in New York City with my partner of the time, we would take like the bus, or we would drive up to Woodstock to see my parents. And I just remember like there were times when we took the bus and we would wait at the bus stop in town, and my parents would wait with us because it's just, you know, like a 2-minute walk, 3-minute walk from their house. And when the bus, like I would have this like anxiety dread about the bus coming. And then the bus would stop and we would get on the bus and I would just want to cry and feel numb inside. And it feels like leaving a part of me. Like it feels like I'm losing a part of me when I would say goodbye to my parents. And then, you know, like sitting on the bus, like, and they're waving and they're smiling and I'm like trembling and like putting a fake smile on, but feeling super numb inside. And so that's like how it has been in recent years. And then, you know, when I moved to Denver, like the separation anxiety kind of like subsides. It's not nearly as intense, but when I do see my mom and then we leave, it definitely comes up again, you know?
I love the way you described like the waiting for the bus, the seeing the bus, the getting on. And I feel like I was there with you. And it reminded me of kind of what I kind of said. It was like, you know, you're watching it all happen almost to you or at you. And it feels kind of slow and painful, right? Uncomfortable. And I could just deeply relate to the sorrow aspect too. And I mean, maybe in some way it's like it's possible that it's like, you know, that it's going to be a hot minute before you see this person again, right? It's going to be a long time. And so that kind of weighs in the back of your mind, I'm sure too. And may contribute to, or may have contributed to like, oh, I'm getting on this bus and I'm only a couple of hours away from my mom. But, you know, in reality, you may not see her for a bit. And so, just, I so deeply.
And I mean, I really like, you know, I love my parents, like, and I know everyone loves their parents, right? Maybe not everyone, but sure. I know some people love their parents, but like, I got along with them. Like they were good friends. So, you know, it was always, it's a hard goodbye. And you know, that one, especially like the separation around and the anxiety around saying goodbye, I've always wondered, like, what does that come from? Is that just something I was born with? But I really think that, so when I was 3 years old, my mom and I were heading back from the grocery store and we were walking back to my house and I was in a stroller and we were, you know, I don't know, like 50, 100 feet from the house. And I unbuckled the stroller and this car comes up behind us and runs us over. And
oh my God.
I went flying. The stroller got completely crushed. If I had been buckled in, I wouldn't be here telling the story. Wow. And the car like ran over my mom a few times, like over her head. She's screaming. And so like when I think about, and then, you know, she went to the hospital. I remember the flashing lights. You know, I remember my dad coming out, or someone coming out, but I think it was my dad with an orange blanket wrapping me up. And then my mom was like in the hospital for at least a week. She had like, you know, a number of broken bones and stuff. And my grandpa came and took care of me. And I just think that in some way, because I was separated from my primary, like, you know, my mom at the age of 3, that definitely like follows me in some way. And that definitely influences my separation anxiety, you know?
No, that sounds extremely traumatic. And so of course that kind of thing is going to stay with you. And the fact that at 3 years old, you have what sounds like very sensory oriented and visual and physical memories of this time is indicative, right? Of how deeply it impacted you.
Yeah.
And continues to impact you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, again, it's crazy. Like what happens that stays with us. I'm sure car accidents probably stay with us more than,
sure.
How many times I've yelled at babysitters, but
threw lamps at them.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so intense.
Yeah. And, it's kind of crazy because back in the 80s, it was like, oh, if they appear okay, they're okay.
Right.
And I'm like,
yeah, there's no deep digging.
Right. Did we integrate the narrative in a positive way in my brain? Like, hello, like what, like, I don't know what meaning I made from that, like that is something so deeply ingrained in me that,
Did you ever as you grew, did you and your family discuss that incident often, ever?
I mean, I don't know. I know we discussed it. I know it was discussed, but often I have no idea. And I mean, I don't remember anyone saying don't talk about it, right? But I do remember in the 80s we were told like just let it go, right? Like don't talk about it, let it go. And that doesn't work when the brain is trying to make sense of a moment. But I don't really remember what my parents did or what my grandpa did, right? Because he came and cared for me while my mom was in the hospital. Did he dismiss it? Was he like, she's okay, don't worry about it, or did we talk about it? I don't remember. So
interesting. It's also fascinating, and just kind of, unrelated to what you said, but kind of like the way my college story triggered something in you. And it's not about college or certainly not about car accidents, but last year, my niece and I were out together and she was on a scooter. She was becoming really good. She's amazing on it now, but she's becoming really good on it. She was really good on it then. And she was, practicing and doing really well with it. And when we would walk around my parents' neighborhood, when I would go, because they usually would stay at my parents' house when they would be visiting. And so I just remember she got really far ahead of me and I was yelling her name, Callie, Callie. And she wasn't hearing me or she wasn't trying to hear me or whatever. Right. And so I hustled after her. And I just remember getting down on her level and I was just like, TT Margot was just so scared. And I just remember her face and she's brought it up many times since then. Yeah. TT Margot, remember when I got a little bit too far away from you and you got scared because you didn't want me to be too far. And it was like, I don't think I'm categorizing that moment as like I was having separation anxiety from my niece. It was more of like, I want to make sure she's safe and I'm like looking after her and I love her, And so I explained that to her. I said, when you got really far ahead of me and I couldn't see you anymore, I was so worried that anything could have happened to you. Right. And I didn't say anything specific, like a car could have hit you or, I'm not trying to plant seeds of like problems.
Right.
Yeah. I was not just like,
fear.
Sure. Right. Yeah. But she really internalized what I was saying. Right. And so but you wonder how many years in the future is she going to bring that up to me? Right. Right. It's what's the stuff that sticks with the kids? And I don't know that I said the perfect thing in the moment. I have no idea. Cause I was activated and I was worried and I didn't yell at her. I made very clear, I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I was just super, super scared because I love you so much and I don't want anything to happen to you, Yeah. And it was the best I could come up with in the moment.
Yeah. You made meaning for it, Right. There was this moment of panic and she's like, oh my gosh, my aunt is afraid, but you explained it. So, who knows how it's going to impact her. Yeah. But so it sounds like when you give children the chance to talk about it, they at least get to integrate it more into a more coherent narrative.
Yeah. And whenever she brings it up, we have a whole conversation about it. Yeah. because it winds up making me feel better too. And I'm glad that she's can hopefully remember it as not a means to become overly cautious about everything in life. Right. But it's a means of saying when I'm out traveling on a scooter, on my bike or walking around, these are some of the things I need to be aware of in the real world.
Yeah. And my actions impact other people.
Right. Exactly. So interesting how a lot of our childhood stuff has stuck with us all these years, and how it's still it's crazy how it impacts us. Okay, warriors. So we think it'd be awesome if you spent a little bit of time today or during your week reflecting upon separation anxiety.
Yeah.
How has it affected you? Do you have any strong or vivid memories of having separation anxiety from when you were a kid, or into your youth or adulthood?
Yeah.
How does it show up? How did it show up?
Does it feel different than other anxiety, or does it all feel the same? Are you able to separate separation anxiety? Or
adorable. Adorable. Yeah. So yeah, we found this exercise to be very, very helpful as we do discussing all the parts of ourselves, all of the parts of our anxieties each week. And so hopefully it can offer you some of that as well, or at least help you to better understand your own human lived experiences.
Yeah.
All right. It is time for our active practice segment.
Yeah.
Where we're going to share with all of you something that we find to be super helpful in times of separation anxiety and in other types of anxiety too, but specifically noticing our bodies when we are experiencing separation anxiety, or how to notice we're having separation anxiety by checking in with our bodies.
Right. That's been one of the things that's really helpful for me in navigating it, is being able to label it and notice how it comes up differently than other sensations.
Right. So how do you go about practicing body awareness or a body scan?
Yeah. So for me, it's really about understanding different sensations. And I've started really simply with is my body hot or cold? Is my body tight or relaxed? Does my body feel heavy, or does it have a lightness to it? Right.
I would even yourself questions.
Yeah. And then, sometimes my mind wants to say something, but it's not really what my body's doing. So I have to really sit and be still and notice. And so, sometimes I'll start at the top of my head and I'll just kind of scan down my face. And I often notice tension in my jaw or in my neck or in my shoulders. With separation anxiety, I said that I notice I want to cry. So I'll notice a lump in my throat. And when I notice that, then I can decide, do I want to try to soothe that, or do I want to be with the sadness? Then I have a choice, right?
Yes.
Or sometimes I start with my feet and I work up to my head, and I just notice what are the sensations in my feet and my legs, in my belly. Can I tell if my breath is going fast or slow? Because that's another sensation that gives me information.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty much exactly how you described it. Pretty much. I mean, I think for me, it's less about the questions off the top. It's more about the routine of thinking about each part of my body.
Yeah.
And noticing what's going on with that part of my body.
Yeah.
And so starting from the head or from the feet, depending on my mood or where I'm ready to start. Or if it's if I notice the one thing, right? I'm holding my breath, or you mentioned the lump in your throat when you're ready to cry. For me, it's my eyes start to sting.
Yeah.
And I notice a tightness in my cheeks.
Yeah.
And so if I feel that, that's usually an instant tell. So it's oh, okay, now that's information. I usually start at my head, right? Yeah. Or if it's a pain or discomfort somewhere in my lower body, that's where I'll start instead.
Yeah.
Relating to separation anxiety or anything.
Or Right.
Yeah. And so slowly thinking and considering each part of my body. And sometimes I take, depending on what's going on in your day, sometimes I sit there for 5 minutes. Other times I'm there for 30 seconds doing a quick scan, lengthy scan. And if the practice feels good too, maybe you incorporate it as a daily thing, or every different times of the day, a morning scan, a midday scan, an evening scan.
Yeah.
Right. And just being curious.
It's just checking in with yourself. And then, for me, when I have a hard time falling asleep at night, I do an extended long body scan, and I'll either listen to a mindfulness practice where someone guides me, or I just do it myself. But sometimes, it helps my mind settle, and it helps me be more connected to my body. And that actually helps, get me ready to go to sleep, since I don't have my mom rubbing my back.
Right. Aw. I'm pretty sure I know someone that's made some meditations or courses on sleep and how to help yourself get to. Who is that person? Oh, wait, it's you.
It's me. And actually, you know what? I had a different win of the week, but I'm going to do a different win of the week now. Great segue.
Quick shameless plug for Abby's amazing meditations on Insight Timer or on her website, abigailwilbur.com. Check them out, folks. You will not be sorry.
Yeah.
You, your kids, do it.
I've been told even grown-ups like the kid ones. So, but that was my win. And I wasn't even going to say this. I was going to talk about...
we have to segue. Win of the week. Win of the week.
Win
Here we go.
The week.
Yikes. Okay, let's hear it. I'm so excited now.
Someone purchased my teen course off of my website and I have no idea who they are.
Woo! Total stranger.
I mean, who knows? My Aunt Sherry might have recommended them because they're from Florida. But other than that, I have no idea who they are. I have no idea how they heard about my course, and it totally made my day and felt like a huge win. So
yay! I love that. That's huge.
I know. It's like, who's gonna be listening to these practices? This is so exciting. It was the teen mindfulness, mindful tools for teens. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Huge win.
Thanks.
Huge win. I love it.
And it's only because of you pointing out the courses that I remembered that was my win from today.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, coming around full circle. Okay. Love it. All right. So think about your life. Think about your separation anxiety issues, struggles, if you had them, if you have them, if your kids are experiencing them. Maybe try out one of these body scans that we're talking about. Take 30 seconds or take 20 minutes and ask yourself questions. Notice the parts of your body. And then, as you kind of said, Abby, do I want to do something about that thing that I'm experiencing in my body, or do I want to be with it and let it happen? And just remembering that we always have some choices. We have some agency. And when we learn to get curious about our experience in the physical body and our minds, we are able to have that many more choices.
Yeah.
So we love you.
Yes.
We would absolutely love it if you joined our Instagram fam. We are at Anxiety Warriors Podcast on IG. You can shoot us an email, send us topic ideas, wins of the week. If you think you'd be a great guest on the pod, love to hear from you. You can message us on anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com and we'll be in touch. And if you haven't yet, and you're listening to the pod, you're right now, you're listening to this. Like as soon as you're done, just head on over to Apple Podcasts. Even if you're not listening to us on Apple, if you have an iPhone and you've got Apple Podcasts on your phone, I know annoyingly it was like on my phone when I got it, and I keep it because I use it all the time. You can hit a 5-star rating for us, leave us a review, and help us find more warriors out there to join our community.
Take you 3 minutes. You got 3 minutes.
You got 3 minutes, at least 1 minute. Yeah, at least 1 minute. So we just want to thank you so much. We love you.
Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We are really so grateful you all are here.
Till next time.